Thanks for joining us. I'm Ash Leatherwood, your friendly neighborhood apologist. And today with me, we have a very special guest. With me is my friend Hudson Hopper. Hudson is a commercial video director and music video director in Los Angeles who's passionate about supporting followers of Jesus navigating the film industry. So I'm very excited about our conversation today and to talk about the film industry, lessons that he's learned, and really just a challenge for you guys to reach the culture in this cultural moment that we're in with the unique opportunities that we have. So thanks for joining us, Hudson.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so kind of as we get into this, we'll kind of unpack a little bit about your story, what you're up to, and really what other people can get involved in as well. But let's just start really broad. So you grew up as a PK, a pastor's kid. How has that kind of shaped you and shaped your view of the church itself?
Totally. Yeah, I grew up in Houston and my dad was a pastor from like as early as I can remember. And it's weird, you don't realize how different your experience of church is as a PK versus everyone else that's attending, because you're like instantly known in this weird like low level celebrity status of you're just walking through and there's hundreds of people there and it's just like, oh, Hudson. And you just run around everywhere and people know your name and you don't really know their name, but you're like, this is that old person that's always here that always talks to me. And so that definitely like influenced just like my relationship with the church of like, I'm going to get plugged in. I show up to these things. This is what happens always. In kind of the end of my high school, we left the church that I had grown up with my whole life. And I started looking at just like different places and showing up as a new person at churches across Houston for the first time and by myself. And I was like, so much I came to realize of like, wow, I am not known at all when I show up into other places. And it had me rethink of there was outsider groups in the church that I attend previously, like that I didn't introduce people well into groups and things. And I realized, wow, now I'm this, I'm walking up and I'm showing up at a church and I have just like no connections here. And so that really just changed how I think about community and how I think about just helping people and introing people into where I'm at.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love to hear that. I also grew up as a PK, as you know. And yeah, moving from home to where I'm at right now, getting involved in a church where I knew nobody to start, like definitely there's a need there to help get people plugged in. So I love to hear that. So you started out at a church in Houston, Texas, right? So churches in big city, and then now you're in LA. So you're kind of familiar with big churches. So tell me a little bit about that. What is it like to be a part of a church in a big city? And what's the church context like in LA right now?
Totally. Yeah. So I attended a Bible church in Houston and then ended up, I started attending a larger church in Houston out of kind of the Acts 29 tradition. It's funny calling things traditions when they're like 15 years old. But and then when I went to college in Austin, I dabbled with an Anglican communion for a while, and then eventually found myself at the Austin Stone, which is a large kind of mega church in Austin. Maybe I think somewhere around 8,000 members, and then it was good for where I was at, and then I moved to LA and joined a community of about 100 believers. And I think just in general, the way churches are in LA, at least, I have a little bit of a spectrum of that may help kind of explain. One, LA is not homogenous, which is really strange compared to a lot of other cities. It has a bunch of subgroups with no in the middle and upper classes. There's almost no LA natives. Almost everyone is a transplant to LA. There is some, but that results in a very strange church community because no one is actually from here. And so, except for communities that like have just always been here. And then of course there is some that are here in main LA. I know OC has a little bit of a different culture in Orange County, but in my spectrum of churches in Los Angeles, there is churches that one is how they approach the culture. There are churches that either are playing very pro culture and trying to fully adapt. And these are some like very massive mega churches that some of them still, I would say, I've seen some that do preach the gospel. Maybe they're a little shy on sin in ways that they shouldn't be, but they still at least preach some of it. And then some of them are just glorified TED Talks and really have fully adapted self-help stoicism as their core ethos. So there's large communities like that. And then there's large counterculture communities. And those are often quite right-wing conservative communities that see themselves as being opposed by the culture. And so their goal is, we're rejecting COVID mandates, because we're preaching the gospel, and here's how we're going to do it. They often are more likely to come from kind of a Reformed tradition. And so you have large churches that bring in swaths of people because of their counterculture aspect. Both of these churches on my I have like a cross grid here, and on the top is they're loud, and they're either loud pro culture or loud counterculture. And then you have quiet churches, and they're either pro culture or counterculture. So on that side, you have churches that are just merged with culture and are quiet. That's just mainline denominations, where a lot of the mainline traditions are your kind of Methodist churches or your Episcopalian churches have kind of moved fully with culture but aren't loud. And then the fourth quadrant is the quiet churches that are still maintaining like deep gospel roots, not fully merging into culture, but not being overtly fighting some crazy culture war, or realizing that they're operating as embedded missionaries in their location. So you may have heard some sort of bias as I'm describing this, because I attend one of the more smaller, quiet churches that is biblically conservative and is holds to the word, but is doing so in a way that's very localized with the people versus very grand. And so I attend a church that specializes at serving just the West Side, and that's where we feel like our mission is. The West Side of Los Angeles. So much churches in big cities are, you wake up, you drive 40 minutes, you attend something with really loud music, a passionate speaker that pulls in some good Bible verses into his TED Talk, and then you drive 40 minutes and you feel hyped up and you're like, let's go. And then there isn't any sort of authority that you've placed yourself under in that church. It is a consumption-based church approach. I feel like big churches struggle with that when they're drawing from so many different areas in a big city. And so I do respect churches that do have some localized aspect. Of course, we see churches that operate in all different ways and successfully. I think the Austin Stone, which I attended for a while, was massive in Austin, but separated its campuses and was able to do stuff effectively there. But that's generally the church culture. And what I've seen. Anything stand out from kind of my explanation there? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And lately on this channel, I've been recording some videos that haven't been released yet, just about church ownership, like getting involved in a church and being a member at a church more than just like showing up. So it's cool to hear you talk about that. Just some unique challenges that lots of churches have, and really just what it looks like to be the church. So yeah, I'm really interested to hear more in a little bit about just engaging the culture, as we'll get into in a little bit. Before we get to that, I want to ask you, so your dad, right, he's an apologist. He recently, I think it was last year, released Questioning God, which is forwarded by Lee Strobel. It sounds like an incredible book. I haven't read it yet, but definitely want to get to that. But what was that like for you, growing up as the son of an apologist? How has that shaped your worldview?
Totally, totally. I do want to mention Lee Strobel he had the quote on the back. I don't actually remember who's it forwarded by. I just remember that he shouts out myself in this first page. That's the important part. He says,
"Let's go."
To his wife, and then he mentions his sons and his daughter in there. But yeah, this book is awesome. If you need a resource, he also has a podcast. And growing up as someone who was just William Lane Craig was a classic name that we were talking about all the time in like my house growing up. And I realized when I like got out of under my parents' roof and was going to college and was with other believers and was mentioning things like William Lane Craig or the cosmological argument or something. And it was like, whoa, this is not something that people talk about. What? And so this is crazy. Like believers, yeah, it was. I think it was so good in so many ways. The way that became, it was so fundamental to. There is the main reason that we believe in Christianity is because we believe the message is true. It's not that it makes us feel good. It's not that we have this community with it, but at the base of it being a truth claim. And of course and a submission to that authority, but it's based on the fact that it is truth has been really kind of fundamental to how I view my walk. I have a bent towards a bent that can be wrong, and maybe because of my upbringing in some ways is I can get very into like an academic theology that's then like that, we're thinking about it a lot, and it's not at all that was what was taught to me, but it was just like a byproduct of I really like figuring things out, and so I'm going to figure out this argument or this argument and learn this theology to such an extent that then it can become like a secular academic exploration, of I want to know this argument, and so one of those things is once I left, I came to realize the importance of and it's like such the classic things that you hear growing up, but just like the fact of the personal relationship, the submission to Jesus, what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus, and even like a surrender state in an action, like living a full encompassing life versus just a lot of arguments, because I knew the arguments, and then I grew up in a place where I was like, I don't do bad things like the bad kids kind of space. And so, but then as I've like grown up, encountering more of that true internal gunk that so clearly requires God's hand to restore back to his original design. So that's like, I think that definitely influenced me. And it's honestly such a blessing. Even my siblings, we go back and have conversations about all of this. My sister's studying at DTS, and she's seeing analogies that are written in books, and like, Dad, did you get this analogy from this? Like, where are we? Like, so it's an incredible, it's cool having that, and so it's really good.
That's awesome. I love hearing that too. Just so many great points you just said. Like I was talking to somebody how the testimony of a church kid isn't immediately disqualified. Like I feel like in our culture, the testimony of someone who grew up in the church can be equally powerful. Because with the trends, like so many people leaving the church, the question is, well, why'd you stay? And like you said, it must go for each of us. It must go beyond, this is just what my family did. It sounds like you had that moment, I had that moment. And that's where it's, is it true? Like, is this something worth dedicating my life to in a culture where it'd be easier to follow the trends and just leave it all behind when I leave the household? It's like, is Christianity true? Is this worth giving my life to? And like the arguments are there, but also it's so much more than just purely intellectual, right? Like the verse that many apologists like to just bring forth is one of my favorites, 1 Peter 3:15, which says, revering Christ as Lord, always be prepared to give the reason for the hope that is within you, but do so with gentleness and respect. As someone like growing up like passionate about apologetics, it can be easy to just hear, always be prepared, right? To have the arguments, to know all this stuff. But the start of it is revering Christ as Lord, that if Christ isn't my Lord, then I really don't have this hope. And giving the reasons for that hope really doesn't mean much at that point. I'm just playing a game. So for all of us, like, it must come back, like you were saying, to something more than just like knowing all the arguments, knowing all the right answers. It must come back to the reality that even though I grew up in a church context, even though I was like that good pastor's kid, like there's gunk in me. I've messed up.
Totally.
I need Christ. So I love to hear that. But moving more into the creative arena, what you're involved in, but kind of from this background of theology, like understanding who God is and what he's done. So we are created in the image of God, right? That's where it's told in scripture. How does that inform our and your specifically behavior as a creative to be involved in creating things?
Totally. Yeah. And you can call me out because you probably know theology better than I do. So if I start making something that feels heretical, shoot me down. But here's my my kind of understanding of what I think is really cool. When you hop into and you're reading Genesis, just right off the bat, Yahweh, as he is established as his primary like attribute in those first couple of chapters, is that of a creator. That someone who forms good things and creates them, and then he endows us with his image. And the only, from a biblical theology perspective, the only character trait that has been established from God by the time we hit that point is one of a creator, and him giving that authority and putting that drop of divinity in us, in that image of God aspect, is something really beautiful, so that when we create things that are of value and of good, in ways we are stepping into the shoes of God in that aspect of replicating our creator by continuing to create things of value. Now, clearly there is moments of people creating destruction that they deserve severe ramifications, and we see that throughout the Old Testament. So there is bad creation as well, often decreation. It's like a destruction of things. So I don't advocate for like, oh well, therefore all creating is good. But there is even just the act of fostering the earth and that which we have been given, and revealing the beauty, is in itself honoring and glorifying and worshipful in that way.
That's awesome to hear. Just a vision for creating that, like it's an act of worship. It's cool that that's what you're getting to do on a regular basis. So let's hear more about that. What is it like being a Christian in the film industry? What's that been like for you? What does that look like?
Totally. Yeah, it's the film industry is very it's not like a thing, like it's just this like lots of people in this interconnected web. And so I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of believers in the space, which I know is not like a lot of people's story, but I live with 7 other full-time creators that are also believers, and so we're bringing each other onto projects. And I also I like really work with other creators to get their finances in order often, so that they don't have to compromise ever on their morals. It's like a big thing that I actually believe in is it's really easy if you're struggling and you're out here as a filmmaker to all of a sudden just be shooting rap videos that are just terrible. There's some great rap videos too, but just there's a lot of ways that you can be pushed into the industry and you find a niche in just a place that isn't glorifying to the Lord. And so even taking and fostering what the Lord has given you and using that so that you can say no to projects that aren't that way. I kind of see projects in 2 ways. There's either projects that I feel like are glorifying to the Lord inherently, like there's a message that I believe in. I just recently worked on a Phil Wickham music video that I was really excited to work on, and the whole message and what we're creating was something that in itself was so clearly worshipful. And there's also aspects of, because creating isn't just an individual act, when you're working on projects that I would consider more secular, that don't have a clear like mission that fully not that it is anti if there's anything that's like anti-biblical, it's like stay away, right? And then there's certain things like, oh, we're filming helicopters for Red Bull, or a music video for the Chainsmokers or something like that. And you're like, okay, this is something where the act of creation being good here and making sure that what I do on set is, and it's just primarily because of what my role is fostering the community that I'm with and respecting the people that are in the different places on a film set hierarchy. So film sets are a very, like, it's very defined pyramid. You have these top players and then everyone below, and people treat each other like they are below. And respecting the humanity of each person on a film set, even if their title is one of that is much lower, is one thing that I've just come to realize of, oh, so many people just overlook these type of people that are on the set. And as you foster and create something and bring those people up and show them like, hey, no, you're totally a part of this. That is in so many ways like following the ethos of Jesus and the ways that he had this flipped upside down hierarchy too. So being like effective to create things that are beautiful, and while doing it, respecting people's image of God aspect as well.
That's awesome. Just hearing how you can shine as a light there by noticing these people that maybe other people don't notice, or just treating people like in a way that maybe they're not usually treated. That's awesome to hear. So it's cool to hear these different opportunities. You mentioned a couple of them that you've been involved in. I love just your vision of like finding like, okay, the things that are promoting, right, Christian values, things that are kind of neutral, and then things that are kind of anti Jesus, maybe stay away from those. I think that's a great just vision. I know a lot of people who are getting involved in film and music. I think that's just a great message to hear. But before, we were talking back and forth a little bit before we started the interview about kind of, you talked about fulfillment in these different projects that you've been working on. You talked about some like that you worked with like Red Bull and DJI and Google and the Chainsmokers. You said there's something that was a little less fulfilling about those projects for you. Could you kind of unpack that a little bit, kind of explain that?
Totally. I came to realize there's also a hierarchy on how people perceive certain projects. To give a strange analogy, I've come to realize that there's two main things that people worship in LA. If you're a creator, it is who you've worked with, and if you're an entrepreneur, it's money that you've worked with. So I call it glory versus gold. So filmmakers and creatives are all about glory. We'll obsess about, you worked with this brand, you made this happen. Oh my goodness, you know Charlie D'Amelio, you know this, you worked on that project. They'll work for like $50 on a set as a nobody so that they can be like, I worked with this person and this is what I did. I made it happen. I like worked with Post Malone. Oh my goodness. Where entrepreneur types, and especially like the more like entrepreneur bros that I interact with here that are in the crypto space, it's like, oh yeah, I just locked a $33 million deal. They're all on this gold energy where it's like, oh yeah, I can't tell you who the VC is for it, but really worshiping the aspect of the money and how big of a deal you locked. So so when it comes to those glory, the projects that are, that is promoting my own glory, I've come to realize that so many of those that are the cooler ones have been like the most miserable. Some have been great, but often as you get more entrenched in these big brands, they take way more control and they push you around a lot more. And although it's really cool to talk about, life becomes more fun to talk about than it is to do, and even more fulfilling to talk about than the aspect of like, oh, I was there and I made something. I go back to Houston all the time and film once a year for a theater department that I was involved in high school, and we do a promo video, and someone came up to me the year before and said, wow, your video last year is the reason that I chose to come here and be a dance teacher. And I made it, that video got like 100 views or something. And I had just worked on a project for the Chainsmokers that was at like 1.5 million on YouTube. And that one line from one person who said, "You positively affected my life and I made a change," was like, this was so much better. Like this is what art is for, and this is what creating is for, and how distinct that feeling was of like, oh, the glory of working for this big brand or working on these big projects, that is awesome. And like, it's been such a blessing that I've been able to work on those projects. Was nothing compared to creating something that other filmmakers would be like, that's low level on the glory side of things, but turned out to be like one of the more impactful things that I worked on.
Well, that's cool to hear. Just your vision, wanting to impact people beneficially, leave a change. And you mentioned before that you've been going to high schools every once in a while, teaching film to classes. So what's the best part about getting to do that, getting to pour into the next generation? And what's the most valuable thing that you can leave with them for the future of the film industry?
Totally. Yeah, I've had the opportunity at Woodlands High School a bit to teach some of their students, and am just passionate about getting people involved in creating. In some ways, I want to show them that the reason Christians lost Hollywood is because they left Hollywood, and sometimes we shouldn't be. I understand the idea of fleeing cities and cultures that are starting to rot and starting to get pretty messy. But in doing so, we lose sometimes. We flee everything when it gets hard, and we all go back and cluster, and then next thing we know, we're all at Texas A&M right in the middle of the, or something, it's just like, and then you have this Bible Belt that's so built out, and these coasts that are becoming increasingly just void of God. And so part of that, of what I encourage people is like, you've probably heard about the craziness that's here. We need people there. We need people here, and we have people here. And there's a lot of believers. Last night we had maybe 25 people over for a worship night just at our house. And just to see what the Lord's doing inside of our community of fellow believers and how attractive that is to non-believers on the outside. They keep being like, y'all have community and you hang out with people. What is happening? Like, this is crazy. Like, and y'all are like, the way you help people and support people in your community, something's different here. And so, and just personally, and maybe it's just where my inclinations are as someone who grew up so deep in the Bible Belt, and with my dad being a PK, or me being a PK, and I've always enjoyed being in opposition to the culture, because it better defines my Christianity. I went to school in Austin, Texas in college, and that helped define my faith better than being in a place where there's this like just low level passive Christianity. Not that I didn't see that in my family, but in just the overarching community of the South, you can feel that sometimes. And so being in a place where in Austin, where it's weird and it's counterculture and it's different, I noticed believers lock their arms tighter together when they're in a community of opposition, where believers that aren't in a community of opposition aren't great at locking their arms together and forming a community. And it makes sense. Like, Christianity's largest growth has always been in a place of suffering. It is one that in a culture that pushes against it is when it explodes, because that's so much of the message of the flipped upside down hierarchy. So yeah,
absolutely. And I love just kind of bringing back to just that vision of community with other believers, that as opposition comes, as we face challenges, that it's not really a call to discouragement, but really just more a call to get with other believers and get involved in facing culture together and getting involved in engaging culture together. So I love just hearing you talk about how you guys are being intentional with having that fellowship and encouraging each other and just doing this together. So I want to talk more about media for a minute. You mentioned just this vision of how we can engage Hollywood and we can make a change that it's leaving that left it so void, right, of Christian values. It seems like lately there have been some celebrities coming out as Christians, right? With people like Chris Pratt, Mark Wahlberg, and others. So is there hope for more Christian values possibly coming out in the future in Hollywood? What does it look like to come out as Christian? Is there opposition broadly in Hollywood against people coming out as Christians? Is there a risk? But is there also maybe something to be gained, ground to be gained in this conquest?
Yeah, it's so interesting. The media landscape right now, just where it's at. You have a lot of kind of alternative players that are trying to arise and try to kind of compete with mainstream Hollywood. It's a little hard to tell. I interact sometimes in the like more traditional space that is that way. Commercial feels a little different, and then social video feels a little different. But there is something about these high profile believers that I think Justin Bieber is a fairly good example too, and people that come publicly. In many ways, they often go to those churches that I was mentioning, of churches that merge with the culture in a lot of ways, but still some of them do preach the gospel well. And so there is a sense that there is a potential for growth here in LA. LA is weird because it's not secular like Portland. LA, I like came to realize I thought it was going to be very secular and very atheist. LA's not atheist at all. It's very spiritual of a city. People, people kind of expect that. Oh yeah. It's just the more secularization that happens, like in the removal of institutionalized religion, that people will become more anti-God as a whole, and they're anti the Christian God, that's for sure. But there is still like there's deep longings of justice, and there's deep longings of connection to higher power, and so many people are communicating in that way. And so even from approaching conversations here is a different way. It is a different battle, and that's what I think the challenge is, that a lot of these Christians that make it public is they either go so like they have to go so dramatically and just leave the Hollywood and say, hey, I'm out, or they feel like they have to merge culture if they want to still be able to maintain where they're at. I think conservatism and Christianity's fusion in this current era is making it really difficult, as Hollywood has pushed out a lot of the right-wing perspective, and along with it, some genuine Christianity and some more secular conservatism that masquerades as it is taken the weight of Christian values, but isn't with an underlying belief in Jesus. And so I think kind of our approach here in LA is a lot of rewriting that, and even the phrases that we use is not trying to bring on so much of that baggage in conversations with people that they associate with the phrase evangelical, and evangelicals fusion with what they see as the current far right and previous Donald Trump, and so separating ourselves from that, whether that's something you believe in and those values you're aligned with. I think the war that we're fighting is different from that culture war, and so we'll see where that goes for believers. I think there's a lot of hope. So many people in my church are creating awesome content and are in the video space. And there is some larger gatekeepers in the Hollywood space that don't allow for that don't allow for that type of content. But as media is becoming less isolated, and we're getting wider just distribution platforms, and you have explosion of things like Bible Project that where it's at now, of like this YouTube channel that influences millions of people through a distribution platform that's not at all traditional. So you do have these explosions, and I'm having these conversations with people on the daily of like, what's our strategy to create meaningful content that can be distributed and look and feel as good as real content? That's the issue. Christians hate Christian content. This Star Wars fans. Like, Star Wars fans hate Star Wars more than anyone else. They're always complaining about Star Wars. And what I struggle with is so many believers like can't accept it. So that's the main reason Hollywood won't fund movies. There was the Noah film that came out 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. It's Russell Crowe, Emma Watson. I was just thinking about it, and theologically, it does some weird things at different points. It definitely takes some Book of Enoch inspiration. But what happened was the secular audience didn't really enjoy it, and the Christian audience just was like, no, this is heretical, and then bailed on it too. And so I think that's some of the reasons. Like, Christians are terrible audience members. It needs to be so perfectly like to the text, or which if it was, it would be a 2-minute film, because most biblical stories are like 3 paragraphs. And so that's one thing that I'm also kind of working through, and even just conversations that I've had with people over shows like The Chosen, where just from what I can see from Dallas Jenkins heading it up, is genuinely a convicted believer that is passionate about making it. And does he probably make some mistakes here or there on how to approach it? Of course he does, because he's but he's like one of us trying to do it, and still is getting just blasted by a lot of Christian audience. I'm like, I don't know. The secular audience is the easier one to please. I don't know how to please us because of so that's. There's so much inside of that. So if there's any thoughts that you have in regards to that, I can answer them. But man, it's a wild space.
Absolutely. I've never really thought about it that way. Like, talk about The Chosen, or like the God Is Not Dead movies, any of these like kind of more recent Christian productions that all of us have an opinion. We're definitely hard to please. So that's an excellent point. I'm kind of camping out on that for a few minutes. How can someone shine as a light on secular sets? How can someone influence influencers?
Totally. That's a phrase we use a lot in my apartment. We talk about like, how are we the influence to the influencers? Because none of us have a massive following, or and are all even a little bit cautious to develop that, because of just we've seen how it destroys people from the inside, and how pride takes over. But we're one connection away from so many different people that we have just the power to be a voice to. And so I think that looks so different for each person that it is. And so often the people that are the most influencer-esque people are like the hardest to really break into, and because they're kind of so hands off. But being a genuine human being that treats them as a genuine human being, and then that speaks the truth. I have a couple of roommates that are just so good at, like, where I may feel different fear of acceptance or different things, they're able to just be like, hey, here's the truth. People want the truth right now more than ever, because so many people are kind of lukewarm, and that's, I even probably credit some of the explosion of people like Jordan Peterson and in the male audience, is like, men want to be shot straight, and they know when people are kind of tiptoeing around them and playing the things, even if they disagree with you. Like, I'd rather have someone that I disagree with shoot me straight than someone that's like hiding something and trying to interact. So being honest with people of like, yo, that ain't cool. That's weird. Like, and reminding people and even being vulnerable about our own brokenness is something that I think is really, really powerful, because people don't reveal that. People don't reveal that at all here. They want to have this picture perfect image.
So would you say a fair summary of that is kind of living your faith out, like loving people and caring about them, and just showing them the love of Jesus, and also being straightforward with the truth, or the words maybe like sharing the truth through life and living life, sharing the truth? You say that's a
totally. Yeah, totally. And then and even both in life and in verbal, like for people that you get close with, not like people that will begin to respect you when they understand that like this person is convicted about something beyond, and then like actually sharing that opinion. It's not like a street preaching that I'm advocating for, the speaking the truth in this situation, but is in one of a deep relational evangelism that is you being close enough to people, and that's one battle that I always still deal with, is the ratio of unbelievers to believers that you should have, and because I feel like it's easier in communities like where I'm at to stay exclusively around believers, because non-believers culturally are so different. If someone's quite new age, they're going to feel very different. And then if you are in the Bible Belt, someone that's a believer and someone that's not a believer is going to feel very similar because of their influence by the overarching Christian culture. And so it's some people I know are like, I need to have a bunch of unbeliever friends and I'm going to go to all these crazy things, and then start merging and being like that culture. And really, I even know the people that I'm reaching out to, I like know that I can't be with them very long, because how quickly their worldview just begins to saturate my brain, and I start thinking through their frameworks, and I'm like, wait a second, no, I don't care about this. Well, all of a sudden I'm like starting to care about like certain things that like they all believe in, and I'm like, no, this when I actually think about this isn't a me thing. And of course you merge to the 5 closest people who are around you, or whatever the phrase is. So so that is like an interesting kind of difficult situation that I think all believers face of, do I need to be in a city where no one's a believer and I'm just there and have the ability to outreach a lot, or do I need to be in a place where I have a massive community that fosters me? So that's the struggle.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a hard balance to figure out, like being around the right people, believers, right, to like cultivate the right cares and the right lifestyle, the right values, and then also being around unbelievers intentionally to be able to actually talk about that stuff. Like people talk about what they care about, right? So like with us, like caring about Jesus and what he's done in our lives, like that should come out naturally. We shouldn't be like hiding in our pocket and then like underhandedly trying to do it. Like it should come out naturally. So I think that's a cool vision of just being around these people, both believers and unbelievers, and just being able to talk about this stuff openly. So that's really cool. I want to shift gears for a minute and talk about Christianity and social media, right?
Yeah.
Before we talk about people like Daily Disciple, Alan Parr, Ruslan, people who are intentionally using social media, which is widely secular right now, to have a Christian platform and reach people. And they're blowing up, right? They're getting a lot of influence. So what's kind of your vision for that? What do you think about Christianity and social media?
Totally. Yeah, this is it's funny because believers we're like always 5 years behind on things. We show up, we're like, oh, this thing's out. We got to be a part of it now. We're going to make movies that look like they were from the 80s. But I see a lot of believers using social media in awesome ways to communicate. I think there is difficulty with it because some of the algorithms and things are designed to capture people in ways that could potentially lead to being unethical. And so I'm really careful about, there's a lot of clickbait Christianity that has arisen simultaneously to real solid content creators that are speaking the truth. And so you mentioned some great examples of people that are using these new platforms as a way to share the truth. And the podcast too, there's so many awesome ways there. I also am encountering so much just conspiracy theory Christianity that I've seen emerge, especially on things that are very like running off TikTok. TikTok is so algorithm and drama based, and so controversial type pieces explode a lot more in short form content. Pieces that either someone goes, "Whoa, yes," or "Whoa, no, I got to share this." And one thing that I've noticed through that is certain believer creatives have to feel like they're always talking about the new thing, and we don't have a new thing, right? Like our message is pretty old, and so we have to be careful that it's like, oh, we just found this new archaeological find that is definitely blank, and I've seen believers just become so infatuated with this, or especially ones that are so focusing on the Jesus is returning tomorrow, and that how that content has blown up, and because it is like, whoa, they're revealing something, and short form content specifically can't contain a lot of the nuance that comes along with these situations of, hey, there is this archaeological find. It's going to take us 6 to 8 years to verify if it is actually what it is, or but then you do have people that are doing it so awesome. Sean McDowell, as an apologist, we've just seen him explode recently, and I work closely with his team that does all his video stuff. I haven't actually interacted with him yet, but been talking to them a lot about, okay, how do they create content? And it's often long form conversations, I think, are awesome ways that can maintain a lot of that nuance without having to feel clickbaity, and that can answer a lot of people's questions. Short form content's great for apologetics, where you can get someone can present like a really solid answer and an answer SEO specifically, so like it can optimize for a search engine, and so, hey, what's this question that people are typing into Google, and getting believers now at the top of those search results is really awesome. People that are passionate, and of course, I think in many ways too, it's allowed people to encounter believers from different traditions in an awesome way. I've become a huge fan of N.T. Wright's work, and seeing through his podcast on Unbelievable, and his and that's a UK production, and I wouldn't have any of that if it wasn't for kind of that. So increased accessibility. I kind of see most social media platforms as fairly agnostic, in the sense that they're not good or evil. They're fairly able to be used for it's the people that use them. It's a bulletin board. It's a middle of the square. So acting ethically will result in stuff being good, and doing the wrong thing will result in it being bad. So I think it's all right to play into those systems a little bit. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of clickbait, but I'm really careful too for some bait and switch evangelism that you see on some YouTube channels. I just people are, especially in LA, like many people saw that and saw Christianity in the 90s and grew up in a culture where authenticity, I think, now is what's exploding. Before, there was aspects of showiness, or we'll get them in with the movie and then we'll give them the gospel. And maybe the culture where we're at right now is at a place where that's very revolting. If people don't feel like someone's presenting a sort of a truth there, and that honesty is what people so long for in the social media space. So I think being honest about your failures, being honest about your struggles, and not wiping it all off with just like Christianese of here's where we're at. That's where I think social media has such an opportunity to show people and get in awesome discussions with people in a very, very public, cool way.
Yeah, that's just awesome to hear, just a vision to be present on these platforms, but to do so not just in trying to get views or more people in the door, but really just being authentic, being straightforward, like you were talking about before, that there's a lot of potential right now. So definitely a big opportunity for us to step into. But having talked about that, being authentic and really being the same person on the screen as off the screen, you're telling us a little bit about what you've been up to in fellowship with other people. You talked about how you have kind of like a Christian safe house where people can come and you help them out, just navigating LA and the film industry and all that stuff. And that you also have just believers meet in your apartment, right? You said you just had a worship night the other night, you studied the word. So tell me a little bit more about just what you've been up to and what other people should be up to, right? Get involved with other believers.
Totally. This last over the last couple of months, I started with one of my roommates a Bible study where we're walking through Romans, and I had a realization, and I think I've heard this from my dad a lot too. Is we're in a different era now, where a lot of people haven't encountered the Bible in the same way that they may have in the past. And so even believers' interaction with actually opening up the word is not very much. And so one of the things that I'm passionate about is getting believers to look at it for themselves and really dig in and feel the arguments and the discussions for themselves. Because here, so many people, I'm going to drive to the massive church, I'm going to hear someone shout some ideas about me from this type of sermon that's just telling me, yeah, go live your life, you're going to make it, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And now I'm trying to get people as much as possible, and myself as well, to so engage with scripture that when all of a sudden people start talking about, yeah, but Christians' perspective on homosexuality, and if you've never encountered that and you just say, yeah, this stuff is wrong, or I haven't like dealt with the certain tensions that are in the text, you just get destroyed, because you've created this whole vision of like, this is what a believer believes, without even understanding really anything about your source documents. So one of the things I've been doing, I've been following Campus Crusades or Cruise method of just, I print out the pages, and we're walking through Romans, and we're marking them up so much, and highlighting them and asking questions and seeing where those questions lead, and really following Paul's arguments and trying to grapple with what he's trying to say, and especially believers that don't even realize why they believe inside of being a follower of Jesus. That was my biggest thing that I encountered in college. I thought I was going to be like showing up to college and it was going to be debating atheists in the streets. And then I realized the biggest conversations that I was having was with my Anglican brothers and sisters and my Orthodox brothers and sisters. And I was heavily involved in college with Texas Right to Life, and worked for them a lot. And it was all Roman Catholic. Almost everyone was Roman Catholic. And so we would do these Protestant panels where I would just sit there and they'd ask me questions, and I'd be like, wow, I've never thought about that. And so encountering that gives you a better understanding of just what you believe. And that's where I've been trying to foster like increased conversations, even across those lines and traditions. And so what I run is, like, of course, parachurch Bible study. It's not associated with a specific body, and it's localized to pretty much creators in this space, because I know many of them are attending churches that are teaching from 3 or 4 passages a week, like 3 or 4 random verses in different translations that fit the exact narrative. And so now I'm like, hey, let's dive into this, and let's grapple, and let's deal with questions and encounter this head on. And then the conversations that leads to, and the better understanding that we have of Jesus and of Paul's arguments and what he's trying to convey, and sitting in that text has kind of transformed even just, whoa, now this can apply, and it's not going to apply as a buzzword, like, oh, here's this like 2 random things that I learned growing up, but now, and I think that's where a lot of the conservative secularism has come from, is people that heard a couple of Bible verses and so, okay, this is what I think about immigrants because of this, and and you're just like, man, what? We haven't like we have to sit in it, and so that's been really kind of beautiful, and seeing people that everyone's a transplant from different communities from the north and from the south, and so people that haven't encountered, people that come from a Southern Baptist tradition or a Congregationalist or an Anglican tradition, and how we can the differences fall away a little bit more in LA when you're around similar people throughout your whole culture, like in the South. The differences are very clearly defined, of like the distinction between this and this is we can see it because we're more zoomed in. I've been interacting with a couple of individuals from the Church of Latter-day Saints, and I've been shocked at how close, even though theologically we are clearly worshiping the distinct things, and it's very clear there are theological differences. Culturally, wow, we are sitting in such the same place here in Los Angeles relative to, there's us, there's LDS, and then there's the prevailing culture of like, oh, you think it's wrong to sleep with someone outside of marriage? Wow, so do we. So grappling with those facts of like, okay, and theologically still very much affirming that there are differences and discussing those, and not just like, oh, well, let's just let everything slide. By no means at all. But also coming to realize of like, wow, this puts us in a very different space. And I bet the believers in Paul's time too, that could lock arms, that were so different in different ways. It was more we're able to do that because of such a prevailing culture of opposition.
Well, that's really awesome to hear. Just so much of what you just said, just this vision to do life with other believers, right? Locking arms, like you said. Because there's so much unity to be had, right? That's what Jesus prayed. Father said, may they be one as we are one. So just this call to unity that I think sometimes we too easily lose. So, and then even just the beauty of just getting to sit down and just read God's word, not just a verse from here and a verse from there and a verse from there. Like, we can't read any book like that, but like just getting to
totally
just, open it up, see what it says in a big passage, just be encouraged and changed by it. So I'm really encouraged by this conversation, just getting to hear what you've been up to, how intentional you are in your relationships and in the workplace, in the film industry. So really cool to hear. As we enter our last few minutes, what are some ways that people can be praying for creatives in LA specifically?
Totally. Yeah, that's a good question. I think one, that we maintain just our faith as a whole. Like it's not easy, and it's super easy. The culture is so loud here that maintaining just consistent. I think consistency. There it is. That's the core of it. LA is the least consistent city. No one wants to work a real job. Creatives don't work 9 to 5. We do stuff. Every day looks different. And as a result, people are not willing to commit to community. People aren't willing to commit to anything. Like LA is a city of dreams, but dreams in the abstract. What could I be? Because I want to get to that place. But people are so scared to commit. And even myself, I've experienced that of really plugging into a body and saying, here's how I'm going to be a part of this community of Jesus followers. And I'm going to attend this thing that's on my schedule multiple times a week. Like, that's absurd for LA creatives to really think about. And so just, I think, prayer for continued growth in that consistent consistent believers. And then that also, I think for these churches that are very creative, that draw in large creative audiences, just prayers that they continue as to be pushed by Jesus into away from celebritydom, pastordom, or whatever it is, celebrity pastors, and towards a just continued focus on Jesus, because of how many of those churches draw in large amounts of creatives.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, please be praying with us about that stuff. But having said that, this has been our conversation with my good friend Hudson Hopper, commercial and music video director. So I hope that you guys are encouraged and challenged as much as I am from this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us, Hudson. It's definitely so many good insights that you've given us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Check out my channel for more videos just like this, more interviews to come. Having said that, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.